Okay, today we're going to try something a little different. We're going to look at one of the project cars. In this case, the oldest project car. Oldest both in the sense that it's a 59 and that I am 15 years into my 5-year plan for this car. My 1959 Plymouth Belvedere. Now when I brought this car home, the surface rust was even worse than it is now. And the first thing I actually did was sand and primer all the horizontal surfaces. It had been sitting in a scrapyard, and you could make out the shape of everything that had been sitting on it, from various car parts to nuts and washers, just from the rust outline. Well, like I said, I've had this car for 15 years, so it's about due for another go at it. This has got the original Poly 318 4-barrel engine that came in it. When I got it, it was in pretty bad shape, and I was considering just ripping it out and dropping something more interesting in here. But I understand that the factory 4-barrel on these cars is a bit rare. So the engine transmission were ripped out, rebuilt, had to be bored out. The engine and transmission have been back in it for about 12 years. Then I started working on other things. Much of the electrical's been redone, brakes. You can see how this has got this old style power brake system with a separate booster and canister, similar to what you'd find on an early 60s Jaguar. It was kind of a poorly assembled job when I got the car. Things were kind of routed weirdly, and the backflow valve was bad. And I also replaced the original master cylinder here with a dual reservoir unit off of a late 60s Fury. Had to redo most of the brake lines because they were clogged. It's also still got the original generator, and it's the kind that needs to be oiled regularly. Obviously the radiator had to be flushed, and you can probably see here the windshield washer bag. It's in very good shape, all things considered. Lots of dust on this. The engine can use a nice rinse off at this point. Fuel system was in terrible shape. I had to replace some of the fuel lines because it was clogged up so bad, and even after flushing the fuel tank, I had to replace filters like every 10 miles, so the gas tank was just replaced, which helped me resolve my fuel gauge issue because it turned out that there was absolutely nothing left of the float. I also went through the electrical system. There's no fuse box on this car, which is a little scary, but not unusual for the time. I upgraded it to electronic ignition. The kits for these engines they only go back to 1962, but it's just a slightly different distributor that's easy enough to swap out. And I still have issue with the turn signals not engaging every time, so there is still some work on the electrical system. This wasn't the original fender on the car. Both of the eyebrows on this car were mostly Bondo when I got it, and this lower panel down here on this side was completely caved in. I found this replacement on eBay. The other one is still the original. I don't know how visible this is going to be, but you can tell where this has all been redone filler, and it hasn't actually aged all that well. As you can tell, this is a 4-door sedan, dual antennas. Just recently started fiddling around with interior pieces, back seat stuff in the garage. The transmission is the 727 cast iron version with the parking pawl. So it's got the emergency brake mounted directly to the transmission, a drum brake. You can see it's got the 3-speed push button automatic. Of course, the original AM radio is still in here. This hasn't been fired up in about a month, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Before I do that, I'm going to show you these. These are the dash fins that have been 3D printed. They're not the originals, but they look pretty good. They're a couple years old and held up to the sun pretty well. The keychain attachment here is also 3D printed. A little forward look. You may have noticed by the sound of it that the exhaust is now a dual exhaust system, so it sounds a little bit better. The most recent thing that I've completed on this job is front brakes. It's got 4-wheel drums with the total contact system on the front with the dual wheel cylinders. But the front drums were pretty worn, so I ordered a new set from Cantor. It actually still had the same tires on it as it did when I dragged it out of the scrapyard. So I replaced the tires when I redid the brakes. Also replaced the rear shocks with a set of coilovers. So the plan going forward is to start focusing on the interior. The universal carpet that was in it when I got it is no longer in there. It wasn't in good shape. In fact, the entire interior was covered with metal shavings when I got it, like it had been sitting next to a lathe for years. I had put a seat cover on it when I first got it, but again, that was 15 years ago. But I am going to try my hand at doing some upholstery work myself and see how that turns out. And that is an overview of my 1959 Plymouth Belvedere project car.